Welcome to Insight Marketing Success, the podcast where marketing knowledge meets real-world experience, from vision to execution.
Jarod, welcome to IMS, Insight Marketing Success. Very happy to see you here today. I had the opportunity to meet you before, but for our audience, let us know who you are.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Ricardo. So my name is Jarod Bowersett. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called Hey Rafi. We're currently building essentially, which is a transactionally based LLM in the real estate space, primarily the residential real estate space. And so our team is building a product which is ultimately automating most of the conversations that take place between like a professional and a homeowner. So you could think of like a real estate investor and a homeowner. You could think of an agent and a homeowner. And right now, the service that we're providing is really just automating a lot of like the sales pipeline in an effort to ultimately stabilize deal flow. But what's really interesting for us is that, kind of this place that we're building to is a world where we can own most of the actual transaction itself, or at least assist in the transaction up until the point where we hit maybe some regulation barriers or some concerns there. But by doing so, we know we can provide a much more equitable marketplace for people to buy or sell real estate. So
awesome. Okay, so how did you get to this journey? Obviously, you went from something to what you're doing today. Tell us about your education and the professional journey that took you here.
Sure. I got out of college 2013. That's when I graduated. I went to a University of Westchester, which is in Pennsylvania, just right outside of Philly. Graduated with a business degree. And at the time, I think a lot of young grads just looking for something that should pay the bills. Actually got in with Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I succeeded very well in that organization. Actually stuck with them for quite a few years. I worked all the way up through a regional position, and then I spent some time as a national sales director for a little bit. And that was a very interesting role where I had kind of last left off because I was managing enterprise contracts where my typical deal size was between $25 and $50 million. One of my more notable claims is in my time there, I personally landed about $500 million in business. So great experience. I've always loved sales challenges, and I've always been very interested in the real estate investing space as well. So I personally was a real estate investor, just kind of in your side time and doing your side hustle things. But I had met a very good friend of mine who ran a transactional real estate investing company. And so for those of you who don't know what that is, you could think of like a wholesaler, right? A wholesaler is somebody who makes really their money from the spread of buying or selling real estate transactions, typically between a homeowner and another buyer. Well, he was doing a good chunk of business, and we had gotten linked up, and he was kind of just starting to explain to me how complicated the sales cycle is for a real estate investor. And to put this in perspective, the typical real estate transaction, once it's under contract, will typically take 145 days to close. And that's because it'll take 30 to 100 hours of manual effort or attention to then get that deal across the finish line. So what that ends up doing, for those who know sales really well, is it'll create these large swings in your cycle time. And when that happens, it's really hard for most operators to find consistency to their sales processes. And when you don't have consistency in your sales processes, like anything else, it can create some roller coaster rides. But what that ends up looking like is very large revenue swings where, and this is not an uncommon narrative. A typical real estate investor might have a month where they close several $100,000 worth of revenue, and then they might precede that with several months of nothing, literally zeros in the bucket. So it makes it really challenging for operators in this space to effectively grow, scale, right? Because they can't really project what revenue is going to be next month. Can I make payroll? Can I even pay for the marketing that I need to? So it's a nuanced and fun space to be in, and that's why this has been such a challenge that I've always looked at as like, hey, this is something that we can really solve for. So as you can imagine, whenever you have these incredibly large revenue swings that are month to month, it makes it challenging, if not impossible, to predict or to plan normal business activities, right? Are you going to be able to make payroll? Or are you going to be able to feed your marketing dollars to bring new opportunities in through your pipeline? And so what this ends up looking like is most of the real estate investors and even agents are just starving themselves because they don't have a sufficient demand in their sales pipelines. And that's why only about 2% of professional real estate businesses actually become anything. It's a very small sample size of successful companies in the space. So hence the reason we're here. It's a fun, challenging opportunity. I've always loved sales and sales problems, and I've thought that this would be a great thing to try and solve for with the folks that are in this space.
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, this friend who was doing this, you partnered with him and you created some kind of partnership, and then you started Hey Rafi?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, in the process of forming this company, and I don't know if this was a continuation of what your friend did or if this was a new entity, but you had to create, you had probably branding challenges. How did you go about the marketing and the increasing the visibility of the company?
So for us, because we knew, we were going to continue to serve real estate investors primarily in the residential space, the REI community is very incestuous. There's a lot, like everybody knows a lot of the other players that are around. It's not a very large space. So one of the major levers that, we continue to lean on to this day is partner marketing. We're engaging through, community marketing, even affiliate marketing. That's been a very powerful lever for us because we can, go partner up with, we'll call it one influencer type or somebody who's maybe a coach, and we can get traction with essentially their whole community, assuming that coach is bought into our service or our idea. So that's been a big one for us. The other kind of traction channel that we've really looked at is content. Content continues to be a great space to live in. More traditional SEO, less so, and it's been more like publishing videos on YouTube and Instagram, which happen to be where most of our customers
and
go.
What channels are you using?
Mostly Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn would be our three primary social channels for publishing content.
All right, very good. Okay, wonderful. And how long have you been doing this with Hey Rafi? How old is the company?
So we've been around a couple years, 2.5 years. We had an initial legacy product that actually we still sell. We restructured kind of our corporation and actually brought in some more investors onto our cap table January of last year. So from that official launch with more institutional money, it's been about a year.
Okay. So in the process of doing that and doing your marketing, I know what's working. So tell us about a situation where you invested into something and you expected this much and you received this much, but you had a lesson learned. Tell us about that.
So specifically something we invested in as far
Yes.
as we were expecting to get a great return on it. Yeah. There's been some interesting lessons that we've learned in the product space and some that have gone actually completely different directions. So one of the original products that we launched was an on-market investing strategy for real estate investors. And this is one of those actual situations where I was like, I don't think this is going to work, but we launched it and ended up getting more traction than we had thought. So that was kind of like a funny genesis to this whole thing. But we've had a couple flops of late where, we launched. So for example, we launched an event with a partner of ours where we would actually go out and sell leads on our platform, or at least for our platform to serve it. And by doing so, we bring in some new customers to say hey, we've got all these shiny leads come in, you can work them within our system and go from there. Well, we had done this event and we had launched 3 or 4 of these campaigns, and we just got awful, horrendous feedback from our customers. Now, we led off with the premise that this is a pilot, right? We're going to be testing this out, but we were under the assumption that, most operators that are kind of in this investing space, they really want lots of opportunities and great opportunities, meaning leads. And there's definitely a fine balance of those two things. We probably did not spend as much time as we should have during the due diligence process to really vet the value or the quality of each one of these leads in a way that would, drive value back to them as the user. So, but we're always testing, things are always going to be great.
Yeah, if not, you perish. You have to adapt.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So how do you approach brand storytelling within your marketing communications? I know you create content, I know you create YouTube, but is there strategy or consistency and the brand story?
Yeah, that's a really good question too, because I don't I don't know that I had ever paid that whole idea as much attention as we probably have in the last couple of months. So at least around content, the one thing that we've been trying to get really clear on is the problem awareness piece of, what we're trying to solve for our ideal customer. And so what that has ended up looking like for us is just literally creating a narrative on what the typical problem looks like for our customer or our ideal customer. And that could come from the space of they are very aware that this is an issue for them, or maybe things are happening and they don't really have the awareness of what that actual problem looks like. So for us, that's just like literally been telling the story. Like, hey, are you, going through the situation where this is happening consistently? And we'll use it more in like a fun, like anecdotal sense of like, hey, like I had this situation happen recently, or like even just with my partner's company, right? Where we've gone through these motions in the past where, we might have a month of closing 250K in revenue and then 2 months of goose eggs. So that's kind of been our brand awareness or like our brand journey, at least recently. And I think for us, at least, we're just trying to create the association with like that story, that narrative, and of course the solution that we're trying to solve behind that with the actual like brand name itself. So I'm not sure if that's always the right way to do it, but that's been our answer, and that's been our.
Okay. All right. What's the biggest trend you see in marketing in your industry and what you're trying to do?
The real estate investing space is really interesting from the standpoint that it's very competitive, and it's very similar to actually the legal space where leads in this spectrum can be incredibly expensive, right? And like a lead might cost several $100s, and your cost per contract to actually get a deal under contract might be several $1,000s. And that's of course because the net ROI on that might be, 3 to 4 times whatever your marketing is. But there has been this very like big push from the marketing teams and even like the operating teams that exist in the REI space to push for like new and more leads, right? It's always like we need more and more opportunities, right? But what ends up actually happening is most real estate investors and agents, they lose about 3% of their pipeline because they don't have good sales mechanics to actually follow up with and nurture and manage their existing bucket of leads, right? It's kind of like leads come in and it's just like, all right, we'll hit them. And then, all right, we only got X, Y, or Z out of that, on to the next one. And so this creates an unstable environment, right? Where if you physically don't have the capacity to bring in more opportunities or even the dollars to bring in more opportunities, you're kind of starving your own business. But there is millions and millions of dollars available in most real estate investors' pipelines that they just need to work or manage better. So kind of like our big narrative, and the thing that we've been hitting on a lot is like better sales practices. And of course, that's the service that we sell.
Who would be the person, the type of person that will best benefit from your solution here, your software solution? That somebody, what type of income, which region of the country, etc.
Our ideal kind of team or business that gets the most value out of our business, they are a US based residential real estate investor or agent team that typically has 2+ people in their organization. So it can be a relatively small organization, but it's typically not just a solopreneur. Okay. They are currently probably doing 1-ish deals per month. And really anybody beyond that, we would be a good fit for. But most of the people that we serve are kind of in that bucket of doing between like $2.5 to $3 million per year in total revenue.
Okay, good. All right. Let's talk about the character. Let's imagine that you go to a restaurant and you're in one of those booths where you cannot see who's behind you and who's in front of you, but you recognize the voices and they start saying, Jarod, you hear your name. And you realize it's your 3 best friends that are starting to talk about you. What do you hope they say about you?
Well, the number one thing I hope they say is like, man, Jarod made some amazing food for us to eat, assuming that I made the food for him. I know it's at a restaurant, but I also love to cook. So, okay. But that's just an aside. No, I think, professionally, I hope the one thing that they say first is like that I truly care about the type of impact and the type of value that, we're delivering to each of the people that are kind of in our lives, right? Like I always want to lead with value and, not have any empty, unfulfilled promises, which is actually the second thing, which I would say is that he's a man of promises and kind of like upholding the things that he says he does. And I think honestly, if we do two things, I'd be very happy.
It's called integrity. So that's good. All right. You're old enough to know that life doesn't go according to plan sometimes. And when either professional or personal things don't go well, and sometimes even both at the same time, how do you stay grounded?
I think that's changed probably a lot for me in the last, 10 years or so. For me nowadays, like I work so much that the opportunity for me to become grounded is finding a way to step back, typically from my professional work. And, whether that just means spending some family time, some more like quality family time, not working at night, and, just taking a night or an evening with my wife to maybe just watch some TV and unwind typically helps with a lot of that. I also find that, doing deep breathing exercises and even some meditation have always helped me as well. And I'd be lying if I told you I do a great job at staying consistent with those practices. But, when push comes to shove and I know that I'm kind of getting ahead of my skis, 5 to 10 minutes typically can make a big difference. And
oh, yeah. I teach meditation, so I'm very well aware of that and the benefits. Okay, let's assume that you are wise today. I'm pretty sure you are wise. You have experience, and you're able to whisper in your ear at the time of graduation a message. What would you say to yourself?
Take the chances that you want to take now. Like all of the hesitations that you've got, or the things that are in the back of your head of like, oh, that sounds fun, but I'm going to do that later. I'll get to that at another point. Like, take the risk and take it quickly. I could explain that more, I guess, if you'd like me to, but at the end of the day, like my most meaningful and fulfilling times of my life have been like the big risks, like the big chances that you took, mostly on yourself, of course. And, like I don't regret any of those things, like learn some hard lessons, right? Failed at plenty of stuff too, but those were also like the most influential moments of my time, right? When I think a younger version of myself was always looking at, like, oh, I need to have that skill, or I need to be good at doing blah, blah, blah first, right? If I had taken more risks, I think earlier on, this would be a different version of myself today or maybe not, but that's my feeling.
Good. All right. Last question. And obviously I didn't send you this because I want you to think about it. What do you want your legacy professionally to be?
My professional legacy, I truly want to be known as a founder who developed a product in the new internet age, right? We are developing AI products, and this is in a lot of ways very symbolic of what happened in the .com era, right, in the early 2000s. So I want to be known as a founder who developed tools, very valuable tools. I also want to be known as a founder who helped really kind of crack open a market that had been for years and years and years very, very closed and restricted to others. That's, of course, the real estate space. So it's very challenging just from an information or even access to information standpoint for even just a typical consumer to come along and purchase a house. Most of them still typically go through agents and investors. And I think there's a world where our service can change a lot of that. And doing so can probably also help bring down the cost of living for a lot of people. So it gives access to more consumers, more opportunities to purchase assets in their own name, and less people like the BlackRocks of the world owning 80% of some zip codes in the middle of Atlanta.
Sure.
That's really kind of like my driving why at the moment.
Okay. Jarod, thank you very much for being part of IMS. Look forward to getting to know you better and collaborating with you.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Insight Marketing Success, where marketing knowledge meets real-world experience from vision to execution.